Hello, everyone, and welcome to McGill Cares webcast series supporting family and informal caregivers. I'm Claire Webster, a former caregiver, certified Alzheimer care consultant, and founder of the McGill University Dementia Education Program. I work with a dynamic team of leading healthcare professionals to oversee the program, who include Dr. José Moret from the Division of Geriatric Medicine, Dr. Serge Gauthier, McGill University Research Center for Studies in Aging, and Dr. Gerald Fried, McGill Steinberg Center for Simulation and Interactive Learning. These webcasts are made possible thanks to the generosity of our donors, and I would like to thank Ryan and Dominic Lynham in memory of their wonderful nanas, Stella Pearson and Muriel Wilson, for sponsoring today's webcast. So our topic today is nutrition and healthy aging, and my guest is Dr. Joe Schwarcz. Dr. Schwarcz is the director of McGill University's Office for Science and Society, which has the mission of separating sense from nonsense. He is well known for his informative and entertaining public lectures on topics ranging from the chemistry of food to the connection between the body and the mind. Recently, the office has focused on trying to unravel the mysteries of COVID-19. Professor Schwarcz hosts the Dr. Joe Show on Montreal's CJAD and has appeared hundreds of times on the Discovery Channel, CTV, CBC, TV Ontario, and Global Television. He also writes a newspaper column entitled The Right Chemistry and has authored 18 books. Professor Schwarcz has received numerous awards for teaching chemistry and for interpreting science for the public, and was the first non-American ever to win the American Chemical Society's prestigious Grady Stack Award for demystifying chemistry. Welcome to McGill Cares, Dr. Schwarcz.
Thanks very much.
I'm very, very happy to have the opportunity to listen to your presentation on nutrition and healthy aging, a topic that many of us are very, very interested in.
Well, thank you very much for that introduction. And as you heard, I do direct McGill's Office for Science and Society. And we have a rather interesting mission of separating sense from nonsense. And as you may imagine, these days, it's a very difficult thing to do because the snake oil salesmen are out there peddling their wares. And our job is to try to convert that into real science. It is sort of detective work. And I'm a big fan of Sherlock Holmes, the ultimate scientific detective, and especially a fan of his classic statement that it's a capital mistake to theorize before one has data, because insensibly one begins to twist facts to suit theories instead of theories to suit facts. And of course, in the world of pseudoscience, that is exactly what they do. They twist the facts to suit their theories. So we try to make sure that we demystify all of that for all of our viewers and for all of our listeners. Sherlock Holmes had a fantastic brain. He had great memory. He was able to make observations and come to the appropriate conclusion. Now, most of us, of course, don't have a brain like that. And especially as we get older, we start thinking about what we can do. How can we nourish our brain? Why? Because aging, unfortunately, comes with memory problems. We all experience this. What can we do about this? There's no shortage of advice. I can tell you that. You go on the internet and you'll find that there are brain foods, there are brain pills, there are exercises that you can do for your brain, and there's even gum that you can chew in order to increase your mental acuity. Now that last one has particular significance for me because I go back to my days in elementary school when I had a teacher. I even remember her name, actually, Miss Wolofsky. And she didn't put up with kids chewing gum in class. And this, to me, brings up an image of a cow. That memory. Sounds confusing, right? Why should that gum chewing image, to me, bring up an image of a cow? Because if anyone was caught chewing gum in Miss Wolofsky's class, you had to stand up on a chair and recite a little poem The gum chewing student and the cut chewing cow are different somehow. I know, it's the intelligent look on the face of the cow. I always have remembered that, and it's fascinating what memory is all about, how just an image of someone chewing a gum can bring back a memory from decades and decades ago. Now, what is this gum all about, this brain gum? It actually has a supposed active ingredient called phosphatidylserine. And this is a naturally occurring compound, and it actually does help with brain function. Whether or not taking a supplement of this is useful, well, like with most dietary supplements, that is up in the air. You can find studies pro, and you can find studies also that show that it has no effect at all. But is it possible to get some phosphatidylserine without taking a supplement and without chewing brain gum? It actually is. As I said, it is present in the brain, not only in our brain, but in cow brain as well. That is probably the best dietary source of phosphatidylserine. But I think most people are not particularly partial to eating cow brain. So where else can we get phosphatidylserine? You can get it from fish. Well, I guess that isn't so surprising because there's certainly history about fish being brain food. And this is an interesting area to try to explore. And for me, it does bring up a memory of one of my favorite writers, that's P.G. Wodehouse, and the stories of Jeeves, the butler, whose master, Bernie Wooster, is always urging Jeeves to eat his sardines so that he can give better advice. And indeed, Jeeves is a very, very smart man, and he does eat his sardines. And he comes up with some very, very clever solutions to get Bertie out of the mess that he usually gets himself into. What science is there behind the eating of fish? There actually is. And we can go through the scientific literature, and we find all sorts of studies about regular fish eating and how beneficial it may be to brain function. People who eat fish show a slower decline in thinking, and as you can see, there's scientific evidence for that. So it certainly is an interesting area to explore, especially when the nervous system is just forming, and that means in utero. That is an important time for people to be eating fish. Of course, you want to be very careful about the kind of fish that you eat, because the large predator fish, like shark and large tuna, usually the kind that is converted to sushi, these have a higher concentration of mercury. And that is something, of course, that we want to avoid. But small fish, like mackerel here, the Atlantic mackerel, very, very low mercury. And these are very high in the omega-3 fatty acids, which are said to be responsible for the benefits of fish. So during pregnancy, it is a good idea to up the fish intake, of course, taking care to eat only the fish that are low in mercury, because there is evidence that women who have a good intake of omega-3 during pregnancy will give birth to children with higher IQs. And these children have a better chance of being properly educated. And of course, that is something that we search for these days, because there's a constant battle against scientific illiteracy that is out there. And if we can somehow impair that by eating fish, well, that's great. There are some fish products that are particularly high in these omega-3 fats. Docosahexaenoic acid, abbreviated as DHA, is one of these fats that supports brain function. And caviar is a great source. As you can see, 100 grams of caviar have 4 grams of DHA. That is a very, very abundant dose. But let's face it, this is not one of the foods that people will be eating regularly. And what about people who don't like fish? what can they do? A lot of people like that. So there are certainly fish oil supplements that are available in the market, and there are dozens and dozens of these fish oil supplements with varying amounts of EPA, that is icosapentaenoic acid, and DHA, docosahexaenoic acid. And they advertise not only brain benefits, but also coronary heart disease benefits. Although notice the word may. This is something that is very commonly used whenever supplements are described. It is what in the trade we call a weasel word, because it really doesn't mean very much. Things may happen or they may not. There is evidence for fish oils having some effect on arthritis, some effects on reducing risk of heart disease. But again, you also find a number of studies that do not support this. For people who do not want to eat fish, have anything to do with fish at all, there are green-lipped mussels from New Zealand. And as you can see, green-lipped is a pretty good description of these mussels. You see the neon-like green glow the edges of these mussels have. And they have a good complement of the omega-3 fats, plus a number of other fatty acids. And widely promoted, Omega XL is one of these products. And as you can see, they make a big deal out of the fact that they have a particular fatty acid combination, and they come from the pristine waters of New Zealand. There are studies about New Zealand mussels. These days, of course, there's a study about everything. But you also have to appreciate that when we scan the scientific literature, we'll find dozens and dozens of studies, some of which have contrary evidence. So we try to look for consensus. Well, there is consensus that probably, taking or consuming fish, that the fish oils do have some benefit, although it is not nearly as clear-cut, of course, as the advertisers would have us believe. And there are advertisers galore for all of the pills, whether they come from fish or whether they come from the green-lipped New Zealand mussel. For example, Rudy Giuliani has become a spokesperson for the green-lipped mussel extract. And gee, if we can't trust Rudy, who can we trust? If you don't want to have anything to do with animal products, whether they be green-lipped mussels or fish, there are omega supplements that rely only on vegetarian sources. And these vegetarian sources are algae that are found in water systems. And this is, in fact, where fish get their omega-3. So you are bypassing the middleman, that is the fish, by taking these supplements. But again, whether or not they are really effective is somewhat up in the air, but at least they are not harmful. They're even incorporated into certain foods. As you can see, this brand of yogurt now has a version that has the DHA. Of course, what you always want to ask is how much, because science is based upon numbers. So just because something is said to be in there doesn't mean that there is an amount that is potentially useful. All of the studies kind of converge on the fact that if there's to be any benefit from EPA and DHA, we're looking at a few thousand milligrams a day. And that is not the amount that is found in such yogurts. So this is essentially just a marketing gimmick. There are also omega-3 fats that are found in other vegetable sources. For example, flaxseed and nuts have abundant amounts of omega-3s. The only problem here is that it is not the same type of omega-3 as we find in fish. The term omega-3 is a reference to organic chemical nomenclature. It means that there's a carbon-carbon double bond on the third carbon from the end of the molecule. Well, the kind of omega-3 that we have in vegetable sources like flaxseed and nuts is alpha-linolenic acid, which is different from the EPA and the DHA. As you can see, this has 18 carbons in the molecule. There is indeed a double bond on the third carbon from the end, But DHA and EPA have 20 and 22 carbon atoms, and that makes a difference in the way that it behaves physiologically in the body. Now, it is true that ALA, alpha-linolenic acid, in the body does get converted to DHA and EPA, but that's a very inefficient conversion. Only about 5% of the ALA gets converted to what we know are the effective fats. So again, there's a lot of hype here too in promoting flaxseed and nuts as a source of omega-3 fats. Folic acid is also a vegetable product. It is one of the B vitamins, and it is found in a large array of plant products. And this also plays a role in brain function. We once again can refer to some properly carried out scientific studies. You can see here, we're looking at a large number of non-demented men and women over the age of 60, and about 10% of these went on to develop Alzheimer's disease. And when you take a look at the nutritional background here, you find that those who had consumed adequate amounts of folic acid had a reduction in risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. So that's an interesting thing to look at. And there's another study where taking 800 micrograms of folic acid or placebo for 3 years improved memory and the speed at which information is processed with folic acid. So Popeye may have been on the right track here, because he, of course, was a great consumer of spinach, and spinach is a very, very good source of folic acid. Although apparently it didn't make him smart enough to stay away from the clutches of Bluto. However, dressing that spinach with olive oil is a good thing to do, because olive oil also has a compound oleocanthin, which also has been associated with improved memory. And spinach, as you can see, is a very good source of folic acid. It is outdone only by chickpeas. So those of you who like hummus, you are getting a lot of folic acid there. But there are many fruits and vegetables, as you can see, that are rich in folic acid. But nevertheless, it is advised that women who are pregnant take a supplement of folic acid, because not only is it associated with better neurological development, that is a brain function, but also reduces the chance of some birth deformities such as spina bifida. So this is very common to urge pregnant women to take folic acid supplements. And this is also the reason why folic acid today is added to flour, to make sure that people get an adequate amount of this. Another type of plant product that has been linked with better brain function is a class of molecules called polyphenols. And the prototype here, one that is often talked about, are blueberries. The blue color that you see here is due to one particular type of polyphenol class called the anthocyanins. And there has been a lot of very interesting research focusing on this. Now, truth is that much of this is done with rodents, mice, and rats. And of course, humans are not giant rats, with some exceptions. So we always have to be a little bit skeptical about studies done on these creatures. But it's interesting, though, because they do serve as models, because we can do experiments with them that we can't do with humans. So as you can see, there's enhanced blood vessel growth in the area of the brain involved in memory in rodents that are given a diet high in blueberries. And they are much better at running mazes. And this is, of course, one way that you test the mental ability of rodents. You put them into a maze and you see how long it takes them to find the cheese. And it turns out that if they have a diet high in blueberries, they will find that cheese more easily. What does this mean for humans? Hard to say, but there have been a few studies about blueberry consumption in humans as well. This one here, but as you can see, 9 subjects. This is not a very large sample size. On the other hand, there's nothing wrong with drinking blueberry juice. It is a lot better than drinking some carbonated soft drink. But I think we would be pressing the envelope if we were to say that this is some kind of magical formula for improved memory. Well, what about dietary supplements? Other than the ones that we've mentioned, I mentioned omega-3 already, mentioned folic acid, but what other ones are there? These days, people are increasingly reaching for Prevagen because it is advertised ad nauseum on TV. You cannot go through an evening of watching CNN, for example, without being exposed to numerous commercials about Prevagen. And the claim here is that it is a breakthrough in terms of improving brain power and improving memory. But notice the small script at the bottom of the ad right here. What does it say? These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. So what, pray tell, is it then designed to do? If it's not diagnosis, not treating or preventing, what is the point of taking this? Well, the truth is, I think there is not much point of taking this. Now, according to the vigorous advertising, the active ingredient here is apoacarin, which is a so-called calcium-binding protein that is found in jellyfish, and they make a big deal out of the fact that this extract is found in jellyfish because they play up this notion that nature knows better. This is, of course, one of the biggest myths that we fight, that nature somehow is always better than any synthetic substance. There's no such equation. Nature is not benign. Nature is quite dangerous. We spend our life overcoming the ravages of nature. Bacteria, viruses are all natural. Botulin is natural. Rice in castor beans is very natural. Scorpion venom, poison ivy. These are all natural substances, and they can conspire to undermine our existence. All right, well, what about this protein that is found in the jelly bean? This is the so-called active ingredient, except that it actually gets degraded in the digestive tract, so it never makes it into the bloodstream. But there's another bit of misleading advertising here, is that the apoacarin that they use in the product is not extracted from jellyfish. It is made in the laboratory. Not that that makes any difference, because the benefits and risks of a chemical are not determined by its ancestry. It's the molecular structure that determines its properties. Anyway, this thing breaks down the digestive tract, so it does not have any use at all. How is it then that they can hype it? They refer to this one study, which is the only one that really has ever been done. It was financed by the company, which already means that you kind of start ringing the alarm bells when you read it. And when you read the bottom line here, it was no better than placebo. This is their own study. So how is it that a product that has flunked its one trial is still advertised as effective? Because what the company researchers have done is something called data mining, or more scientifically, post hoc analysis, where they take all of the data and they hunt through it to see whether or not they can find some subgroup of subjects where there was some benefit. And they did manage to do that. They found one group of subjects in one age category that did have some benefit. Of course, they conveniently forgot that 27 other such categories that they looked at showed no effect at all. So I don't think there's any benefit in this. And the Federal Trade Commission in the US doesn't think so either. And they have charged the marketers of Prevagen with deceptive marketing techniques. And this has resulted in a lot of lawsuits against the company, class action lawsuits, which have been settled. And they have paid out millions of dollars. But they are willing to do this because they make a lot more millions of dollars through their vigorous and misleading advertising. So there just is not evidence that Prevagen is any good. And of course, when you watch these ads, they use a lot of weasel words in there. And they also use a lot of personal anecdotes. And personal anecdote, of course, does not make science, but it also doesn't mean that you can legally go after them, because they will say that that's just the opinion of the people that they have interviewed. So Prevagen is widely sold. It is actually sold in many pharmacies. And in the same pharmacies, you'll also find other displays for brain supportive materials, things that are supposed to increase your mental alertness. And ginkgo biloba is one of these, a very, very popular product. And it is an extract of the leaves of the ginkgo tree, a very pretty tree, especially in the fall when the leaves turn this yellow color. There's one disturbing property of ginkgo biloba is that the female trees produce these fleshy pods that contain the seeds. And when they fall down and they're crushed, they release the horrific odor of vomit, of rancid butter, of dog poo. Butyric acid is what they release. But that, of course, is a different story. The leaf extract does not have that smell. And the promoters tell us that it is the oldest living tree known to man, which is true. It is estimated that it has been around for about 200 million years. But of course, that doesn't have anything to do with its ability to have any effect on the brain. But that's how it's promoted. It increases cerebral circulation. You can actually make some measurements on blood flow in the brain, and it is improved with ginkgo biloba. Of course, that does not necessarily mean that it increases your brain power. However, we do know that it interacts with anticoagulants, so anyone who is on Coumadin, for example, has to be very careful with taking ginkgo biloba. But what about its efficacy in improving memory, cognitive abilities? Studies have been done. Large number of studies. Here is a typical one, a randomized controlled double-blind trial, and that's what we look for. That's the gold standard of science. And what we find here is that the results in this study indicate that ginkgo did not facilitate performance in learning, memory, attention, or concentration. There are some studies, however, that show some minor improvement. And again, when you look at the overall number of studies, you do not come away convinced that this is something that has a significant amount on effect on memory. In Ayurvedic medicine, which is the ancient Indian medicine, there's another herbal product that is emphasized, and that is Bacopa monnieri. And as you can see, it is promoted as an herb for memory function. It is available in supplements. And again, there are studies, and some of the studies are somewhat encouraging. In this particular one, in the present study, as you can see, there were no significant differences between the two groups on any cognitive measure. However, there was a trend for lower state anxiety in the Monnieri group as compared to the placebo group. But again, notice the kind of weasel words that are used here, a trend towards. Well, what does that really mean? Is that of any significance? Again, I don't think that we have enough evidence to be promoting this particular product for memory enhancement. Ginseng, also widely popular, maybe the most popular cognitive enhancer that is on the market. And there are all sorts of ginseng products out there. And let me just mention that this is another issue, is that these dietary supplements are not regulated the same way that prescription drugs or even over-the-counter drugs are regulated. They are regulated as dietary supplements. And here the evidence that is asked for is much, much less. And the safety studies are not as extensive as they are for prescription drugs or even over-the-counter. And you're also at the mercy of the manufacturer. because you never know that what is declared on the label is actually what is in the product. There was a recent study about ginkgo biloba supplement, which actually showed that there was no ginkgo in the product at all. And I suspect that this is quite widespread because no one goes around checking whether or not these products actually conform to the label. The advertising, again, is very, very imaginative. Over 1,400 studies have demonstrated that ginsana, that's one particular brand of ginseng, is a panacea. Panacea means a cure-all. Now, obviously, there's no such thing as a cure-all. And certainly there are no 1,400 studies that have demonstrated that. This is just imaginative advertising, as is this one here. This is your brain, and this is your brain on ginseng. It becomes much, much more vigorous. The only thing that is vigorous is the advertising, where they tell you that it improves your memory, improves your mood, improves your clarity. And they do back it up by some studies. There are some, again, not overly impressive, but here's one about people who take ginseng over their lifetime. So this doesn't particularly apply to North Americans because we don't do that. But in Asia, it is very often a part of the diet. And you can see that cumulative ginseng use for longer than 5 years may be beneficial to cognitive function in later life. What do you notice here? Once more, the weasel word may be. Yes, it may be, and maybe not. There's something, though, to be really concerned about when it comes to these cognitive supplements. And that is that while they are advertised as dietary supplements, herbal products, some have been found to be contaminated with real prescription drugs. Now, that is not a safe thing because the prescription drugs like vinpocetine and racetam may be effective in terms of cognitive enhancement. And I'm sure in this series you've heard from some of the experts about those medications. But when they are prescribed in the proper dose and the patients are followed. When they are put into these dietary supplements, there's no regulation. They are not declared on the label. The reason they're put in there is because it will produce some effect so that people will come back and buy the product again. But the dose is totally unknown, and these patients are not overseen by any physician. A particular problem that I think you should be alerted to is this one, tianeptine, which is available on the web as a dietary supplement, usually promoted for enhanced brain function, with some other claims as well. Now, this is an interesting story because it all actually originates from a prescription drug. This is available in Europe. It's not available in North America. And it was developed in research that was focused on antidepressants. As you can see, tianeptine has some molecular similarity to amitriptyline, which is a classic tricyclic antidepressant. And the research that emerged out of this showed that there was some benefit in depression and anxiety and pain relief and cognitive disorder, especially because this is an opiate agonist. So it acts in the body as if it were morphine, which obviously does introduce a problem. One problem is that it's readily available as a dietary supplement, and some people use it. As you can see, clever description here, it's a way to scratch the opioid itch without getting caught. So they are actually promoting this as a substitute for opiates. But of course, there are side effects to this, and these can be quite serious because we are dealing with a very serious drug here when we're dealing with an opiate. And the scientific literature already records cases of possibly lethal effects of people who are taking this when either they can't get any opiate or they're trying to wean themselves off of opiates. This is not the way to go about it. And unfortunately, it is quite readily available. You can go on the internet, you find it. In fact, sometimes you can just go into a gas station and you can purchase it there as well. We certainly need better regulation of these so-called dietary supplements. There are some serious drugs that really can improve brain function. They're called nootropics. And the definition here is very straightforward. These are chemicals that are introduced that can improve mental function, like memory, motivation, or attention. Again, the science here is a little bit murky about just how well they can gear up the brain for activity. But once again, the advertising is very, very clever. I don't know, maybe the advertisers are taking some of these nootropics. The one that is most famous is modafinil. It is available as a prescription item, as Provigil. But again, while it may have some benefit, it should be taken under a physician's care. But it's quite widely promoted, and you can also get it on the internet, not legally, but the internet, of course, makes available many illegal substances as well. And Provigil works, at least in movies. Limitless is a movie that is basically based on nootropics, and it gives the impression that these are far more potent than what actually scientifically has been proven. So what else can we do in order to lubricate a squeaky brain? Something that is sort of palatable. Believe it or not, chocolate. Well, that brings up an interesting study. At Wheeling Jesuit University, volunteers were given milk chocolate, dark chocolate, or carob, which is a chocolate substitute. And you might imagine it wasn't volunteers for such a study. What did they find? After allowing the chocolate to digest for 15 minutes, volunteers asked to complete a series of questions to measure their cognitive performance. And interesting finding, verbal and visual memory scores of those volunteers who ate milk chocolate were significantly higher than the scores of those who did not. That's the kind of thing that we can accept, eating chocolate in order to improve brain function. But you don't want to overdo this. Too much of anything is not good. In fact, what we have learned from some recent studies is that if you just reduce your total calorie intake, you will increase your memory function, your word recall function. Of course, reduction of 30% of calories is a significant reduction, and it's not one that would make most people happy. But this is a legitimate scientific finding. So what can we say to sum it all up? Yes, diet does play a role. I think that a diet that is mostly based on plant products and seafood is probably the best diet when it comes to brain function. But the brain is the most complicated machine on the face of the earth, and there are no simple solutions to enhance its properties. Exercise, of course, is good not only for our body, but for the brain as well. And there are studies that show that. People who are in good physical condition have better brain power. And that, of course, is also the way to stretch out your years. The more you exercise, the better you are physically, and the better you are mentally as well. So, you've had some brain exercise here for the last 40 minutes or so. Let's see whether or not this brain exercise following this presentation has worked. So here's a little puzzle for you. On Earth, of course, a day always follows a day. But there is a place where yesterday always follows today. Where is that? There actually is a place like that. You know where yesterday always follows today? In the dictionary. All right, well, if you got that, it means that you're doing well with brain power. If you didn't, maybe it's time to look at the fish oil supplements, or maybe even a couple of squares of milk chocolate. If you're further interested in some of the stuff that we've talked about here, we do have a website. We have thousands of articles of all kinds there, and you can even sign up for our weekly newsletter, which of course comes free, shows up in your inbox every Saturday morning at 6 a.m. And it's a compendium of information that is both educational and, I think, entertaining. We also have a Facebook page, and of course, these days, every twit must Twitter. So we do have a Twitter account. So thanks very much for your attention. And I hope we've been able to do something here to at least make you think about increasing methods that may work to improve cognitive ability.
Thank you, Dr. Joe. This was one of the most comprehensive and educational information sessions that I've ever had. I need to tell you that. Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
There is so much misinformation that is out there right now, and a day doesn't go by where people aren't even reaching out to me and asking me if I heard about this research or this drug or this supplement. And just absolutely, I feel so much more educated from watching this, and we will make sure to put a link to your website in the resources section of the McGill Dementia Education Program. And I highly encourage everyone to go and have a look at your website so that they understand, what they're reading. Is it real or not real? And I love the word weasel word, I have to say, that was truly amazing.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you very much. So please join me on Wednesday, June 23rd, when I will be joined by Dr. Tan Dang Bu to discuss the role of sleep and healthy aging. I'm very much looking forward to this webcast. This webcast is an initiative of the McGill Dementia Education Program, which is funded by private donations. Once again, I would like to sincerely thank Ryan and Dominic Lynham in memory of their wonderful nanas, Stella Pearson and Muriel Wilson, for sponsoring today's just absolutely amazing talk on nutrition and healthy aging. If you'd like to make a contribution to our program or for more information, please visit us at mcgill.ca/dementia. And if you would like to join our mailing list, please email us at dementia@mcgill.ca. Thank you for watching, and see you again soon.